My name is Sarah Carter. I'm 35 years old, and I built a multi-million-dollar tech company in Chicago from the only savings my grandmother left me. Growing up, I always felt like I fell short compared to my younger sister, Emily. My parents always made her the priority, but I never imagined just how far their favoritism would go, until that letter arrived. The envelope carried more than just words. It held the ultimate betrayal, one that eventually led to a legal battle I never saw coming. Sometimes, the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who try to take everything you've built. But before I dive into how my parents tried to strip away everything I created, tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so I can keep sharing real stories from real lives, including my own. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, in an old three-bedroom house with faded blue shutters, with my parents, Linda and James Carter, hard-working people who lived comfortably but were far from wealthy. My mother worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic, and my father was a sales manager at a local furniture store. I grew up feeling like I was always in the shadow of Emily, my younger sister, the golden child of the family. From an early age, Emily got new dresses, shiny shoes, and a backpack, embroidered with her name when she entered kindergarten, while I wore hand-me-downs from a cousin, with hastily stitched patches at the knees. My mother said I needed to be practical, and that Emily was pickier, as if to justify the favoritism. I remember the year I got an A on my math test. My father only nodded, "Yeah, good," then turned away. Just a few days later, he took Emily out for ice cream because she got a B+ in English. I used to play softball practicing every week, hoping my parents would come watch, but not once did they show up. In contrast, they always sat front row at every single one of Emily's ballet performances. Birthdays and Christmases were no different. I got a $15 gift card, while Emily had princess parties with a mountain of expensive presents. When I turned 10, I had a small cake and a few classmates over. That same year, Emily had a party at an Italian restaurant, complete with someone dressed up as Elsa. I didn't complain. I just cried quietly in the bathroom, wondering what I'd done wrong. In that family, there was only one person who ever made me feel like I mattered. Grandma Evelyn. She lived about an hour's drive away, and every visit to her felt like stepping into a different world. She was the only one who listened when I talked about grades, friends, or my dream of starting my own company. She had once run a successful little bakery before retiring, and she instilled in me the belief that a woman didn't need permission to succeed. She used to say, "Sarah, there are people who will never want you to shine, because your light exposes their darkness, but you must keep walking." Evelyn was the first person to tell me that my mother didn't want me to outshine, not because I wasn't good enough, but because it made her feel small. I was too young then to understand it all, but those words quietly paved my way forward. Instead of trying to earn recognition from a family unwilling to give it, I started focusing on building my own path, a path I would walk, even if I had to do it alone. In high school, I no longer sought validation from my family. I poured all my energy into schoolwork and extracurriculars. I joined the business club, became treasurer, and later president, organizing fundraisers and small seminars at school. After classes, I worked part-time at a nearby tech repair shop, where I learned how to take apart computers, fix phones, and, most importantly, how to serve customers with patience. I worked hard, saving every bit of my modest wages, with one single goal: to earn a scholarship to a good business school and get out of Springfield, as far away as possible. During all those years, my parents never asked about my grades, never wondered where I went after school. They were always busy with Emily's dance practices, competitions, my mother's dinner parties, or my father's dealership meetings. I used to wonder if they would notice if I disappeared one day, but instead of resenting them, I used that neglect as fuel. I studied late into the night, worked weekends, wrote scholarship essays while my friends were still asleep, and finally, when I got the acceptance letter and a full scholarship from the University of Chicago, one of the happiest moments of my life. My parents' only reaction was, "Good, at least we don't have to pay." They did attend my high school graduation, but sat in the back row and left right after I received my diploma because they had to take Emily to a friend's birthday party. That day, I stood alone in the parking lot, holding my diploma. No flowers, no family photo. But I smiled, because I knew I just closed one chapter and was stepping into a new world, one where I would define my own worth. I arrived in Chicago with an old suitcase and a dream no one believed in, except me and Grandma Evelyn. Every weekend I called her, telling her about classes, my cafe job, and the loneliness of a girl far from home in a big city. She always said, "As long as you keep believing in yourself, everything else will follow." But in my sophomore year, I got a call that brought me to my knees. Evelyn had a stroke and didn't make it. I rushed back to Springfield, to the old house with the blue shutters, but this time for a funeral, with no warm hand waiting for me. At the funeral home, my mother was busy organizing things, not a single tear, while Emily cried loudly like an actress, though she had rarely visited Evelyn for years. I stood still, unsure what to feel, except a hollow ache inside. When Evelyn's lawyer read her will, everything exploded. She had left me $115,000, her life savings, and her vintage jewelry collection from her younger days. My parents were furious, claiming she was unfair, that the money should have gone to my mother, her biological daughter, or at least be split with Emily. I didn't respond. I just remembered all those afternoons in her old kitchen, the lessons she taught me about independence, and the way she looked at me, like I was truly worthy. When I refused to split the money with Emily, my mother went silent for a moment, then coldly said, "You're selfish. This family raised you, and now you turn your back." But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I just felt chosen. For the first time, I was the one prioritized. For the first time, someone had left something just for me. Not because I was a daughter, not because I was obedient, but because I deserved it. From that moment, I knew real love doesn't demand repayment. And I began to understand that blood doesn't equal fairness, especially when they only come to you when there's something to gain. After graduation, I didn't go back to Springfield. I stayed in Chicago, rented a small apartment near the train station, and started working at a mid-sized tech company. The pay was modest, but enough to cover bills and dinners of instant noodles. My parents didn't care about my job. In one call, my father just said, "As long as you don't ask for money." But I never intended to live like that forever. Through my interactions with clients, I noticed a recurring problem. Small businesses lacked effective, user-friendly, customizable customer management tools. Existing software was either too complex or too expensive. That's when the idea for SafeLink Solutions started forming. A customer management platform tailored for small and mid-sized businesses, friendly and simple. I remembered Evelyn's words, "Don't wait for permission to start." I used the $115,000 she left me as seed capital. No new car, no upgraded apartment, no showing off. I quit my job to focus entirely on the project. I taught myself advanced coding, UI design, wrote a business plan, and studied marketing. There were days I sat in front of the computer from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m., eating peanut butter sandwiches with no one calling to ask if I was okay. The first version of the software failed. It was slow, buggy, users didn't like it. I sat alone in my apartment full of sticky notes and whiteboards thinking, what if I was wrong? But I remembered what she once said. You'll fall, and that's when you'll find out if you can get back up. I chose to rise. I rewrote the code from scratch, studied user interactions, sent surveys to small groups, listened, and improved. One rainy night, at a networking event for the tech community, I met Susan Brooks, a woman in her 50s, silver-haired former CTO of a major software company. She stood listening to my pitch, then simply said, "Send me the demo. If I like it, I'll mentor you." The next day, I sent her the revised demo, and my life began to shift in an entirely new direction. Susan wasn't easily impressed, but she knew real value when she saw it. After trying the demo, she called me back with just one line. "It's not perfect, but it has potential. Meet me Monday, 9 a.m. From that first meeting, she became a mentor, strict, blunt, but also the first person to place faith in me in a practical way. She didn't coddle me with praise, but handed me Excel files riddled with logic errors, harsh feedback on UX, and questions that kept me up all night rethinking my entire business model. At times I was exhausted, breaking down in tears over red-marked plans, but Susan only said, "This isn't about feelings, it's about strategy." She taught me that success doesn't come from hoping others believe in you. It comes from proving your worth through action. And then, after nearly 4 relentless months of work, I signed my first major contract. A 12-branch gym chain in the Midwest agreed to adopt SafeLink Solutions as their customer management software. The moment I got the confirmation email, I sat motionless in front of my screen, unable to believe it was real. I didn't scream, didn't call my parents. I just quietly made a cup of tea, thought of Evelyn, and texted Susan. "We did it." She simply replied, "I knew you would." That contract was enough to hire 2 part-time developers, open a small office at a downtown co-working space, and for the first time, pay myself. I bought a decent office chair, a good coffee machine, and hung on the wall a photo of Evelyn and me in her old bakery. Those early days weren't easy, but every positive customer email, every smooth software run was a victory. Small, but real. I didn't have parents cutting the ribbon, no headline stories. But I had a growing sense of belief built by my own hands. And that was enough to keep me moving forward, knowing the road ahead would still be long and full of challenges. When SafeLink Solutions started generating steady revenue, I thought, maybe now is the time to reconnect with my family. I began sending gifts during the holidays, a wool scarf for my mother, a tie for my father, a self-help book for Emily. Small, meaningful gifts. Nothing flashy. I also called more often, asked about their health, hinted at coming home for a visit, but the responses were the same: polite indifference, conversations that ended in silence. I tried not to let it get to me. I convinced myself that time would soften things. That Thanksgiving, I drove back to Springfield on my own, bringing a homemade pumpkin pie, Evelyn's recipe, and a bottle of wine from a local shop. Dinner was held in the old dining room, still cozy despite its age. I sat at the table, trying to share stories about my new office, my first clients, the gym chain contract. My father took a sip of wine and said, "Well, everyone tries a startup. But you should also prepare to find a stable job when this phase passes." I forced a smile. Then my mother chimed in. "At least you're not married yet. No one else has to get dragged into this risk." I stayed silent. Emily, chewing on her turkey, suddenly smirked. "I work part-time all week and still have more free time than you. Can't imagine why anyone would choose to live like that." I didn't respond, just picked up a piece of potato, trying to swallow the bitterness inside. When Emily announced she was getting engaged to Mark, a bank employee, the whole table erupted in cheers and congratulations. My mother immediately started talking about party plans, bridesmaid dress colors, and the budget. I sat there, like a passerby, abandoned in the middle of a conversation that was supposed to include me. No one asked if I was staying the night or needed anything for the drive back to Chicago. I quietly cleared the dishes, then said goodnight. No one replied. Driving back, light snow began falling, covering the windshield in white. In that moment, I understood. Some doors, once closed for too long, don't open just because you knock. And some relationships, even when tied by blood, can make you feel lonelier than a stranger. Emily's wedding took place the following spring, at a lakeside resort, a grand hall with crystal chandeliers and long tables draped in pristine white linens. I still sent a wedding gift and RSVP'd, though in my heart I wasn't sure if I should, but I went, wearing a pale blue dress, carrying a polite smile and a fragile hope that maybe, this time, I wouldn't be invisible. I arrived early, asked my mother if she needed help, but she simply said, "No need. Everything's taken care of." When I asked my father about seating, he led me to a table tucked near the entrance, seated with a few distant relatives I'd only met once as a child. Emily never came near me during the entire event, though I tried making small talk with a few of her friends. When she stepped on stage for the ceremony, I watched from afar, my sister, glowing in her white dress, surrounded by our parents, friends, and endless applause. And I, like a spectator on the sidelines, wasn't invited for the family photo, wasn't mentioned in any speech, not even a courtesy thank you. When the party ended and everyone embraced in celebration, I stood by my car, waiting for a glance, an invitation, a sign that I still belonged to this us. But all I saw was my mother laughing with the bridesmaids and my father pouring drinks for his friends. No one noticed I had left early, alone. On the way back to the hotel, I looked at my reflection in the car mirror, a woman who had built her life from nothing, who ran a small company with a devoted team, and yet still wasn't enough for the very people who gave her life. That night, in the small hotel room, I opened my laptop and reviewed the monthly report for SafeLink Solutions, where customers had emailed to say the software helped them save their business. And I realized, maybe I had been seeking recognition in the wrong place. Maybe family isn't where we're born, but where we are valued for who we truly are. Just as I was beginning to accept that I would always be an outsider in my own family, SafeLink Solutions unexpectedly won a regional tech award, Innovative Platform Supporting Small Businesses of 2020. Given by a prestigious tech magazine. They interviewed me, published a piece with a portrait photo, recounted the journey of starting from zero, and called me the woman who built an entire ecosystem out of silence. I didn't expect my family to see it. But just days after it hit the cover, I got a call from my mother. For the first time in months, her voice sounded warm. "I just read the article. You've done a lot. Your father and I are proud of you." I almost believed it, almost let myself soften. But then, after just a few more conversations, the familiar signals returned. Subtle, unspoken. My father mentioned trouble at work, possible cutbacks. My mother spoke of a leaking roof, repair costs too high. Emily messaged that her part-time job couldn't cover expenses, and Mark was in debt after the wedding. I listened, said nothing. A week later, my mother called again, this time with a cautious but clear tone. "If you could help out a bit, our family would be more secure. After all, you have more than enough now." I froze. Not because of the request, but because of the tone. As if my success was communal property, and their absence through every step of my journey had never happened. I didn't agree, nor did I refuse. I just said I was busy, and would think about it. That evening, I walked alone along the shore of Lake Michigan, watching the city lights reflect on the water, my heart a mess. I used to think that if I succeeded, they would change. But it turns out, the only thing that changed was how they wanted to exploit it. And for the first time, I was truly afraid. Not of being rejected, but of being approached with a purpose I was no longer naive enough to miss. I used the first prize money from the tech award and part of SafeLink Solutions' profit to buy my first apartment, a warm space with a balcony overlooking the lake, white walls, walnut shelves, and a lavender painting I handpicked. I hosted a small housewarming with friends, colleagues, and the people who had walked this entrepreneurial path with me. Rachel brought homemade cake, Ethan popped champagne. The room was full of laughter and congratulations. I had sent formal, polite invitations to my parents and Emily. No blame, no accusations. But they didn't come. No apology, no excuse. My mother simply texted, "You live too far." Standing in my new kitchen, watching everyone raise their glasses, For a brief moment, I saw myself as that little girl again, alone in the bathroom, hearing laughter from her sister's birthday party in the living room. But this time, I didn't cry. I quietly poured more wine, stepped onto the balcony, and took a deep breath. I had come a long way, from the student working nights, from the girl whose parents never cheered at her softball game, from the sister left out of the wedding photos, to a woman who could choose her own paint color, name her own company, and surround herself with people who truly cared. I didn't have family by my side the day I moved in, but I had a life I built myself. And maybe that was worth more than any blessing withheld. My 34th birthday came on a rare, clear March day in Chicago. I woke up in my new apartment, got a message from Rachel, a small birthday cake from my favorite bakery delivered to the door, and a cozy evening with friends. Not loud, but enough to make me feel valued. I wasn't expecting anything from my family, so when I opened the mailbox and found a handwritten envelope from my mother, I was surprised. The letter had no date, no birthday wishes, just neatly typed lines, no handwriting, no emotion. The family has decided to update the will following your father's passing. As you are already well off and no longer closely connected to the family, we believe it is reasonable to exclude you from the inheritance. Emily, given her current difficulties, will receive the remaining assets. We hope you understand that this is best for everyone. At the bottom, my mother signed Linda Carter. As if I were a stranger, not the firstborn daughter she once held in her arms. I sat still for a long while, the paper trembling in my hands. I didn't feel anger at first. The initial feeling was emptiness, as if a thread, already worn thin, had finally been cut. I showed the letter to Rachel. She stayed quiet for a moment, then looked at me and said, "This is emotional abuse, Sarah, not a reasonable decision. They're punishing you for daring to live a life that doesn't need them." I didn't respond. Instead of writing back, I poured myself into work, expanding SafeLink, upgrading the system, training staff, closing new partnerships. I used every waking minute to prove that I didn't need them to succeed. But every night, when the screen went dark and the city quieted, I still felt something ache. Not because of the money, but because of the loss of hope. That one day, they'd truly see me and say, "We were wrong." But instead, all I had was a letter sent on my birthday. A twisted gift, reminding me that to them, I was never enough. I didn't learn about my father's death from a family call, not even from a personal message, but from a brief text sent by a distant relative. "James passed away last week. Hope you're okay." My heart felt as if someone had squeezed it tight. I didn't believe it at first. I called my mother. Line busy. I called Emily. No answer. Then I went online and found a short obituary on the local funeral home's website. My name wasn't listed among the surviving family members. I sat still in my office, hollow inside. A few hours later, I called my mother again. Her voice was cold as steel. "Your father died of a heart attack. But you're busy with your little company, aren't you? I didn't think it was necessary to bother you." I said nothing for a few seconds, then asked, "Is there a will reading?" She paused for a beat, then replied flatly, "That's a family matter. You don't need to worry about it." That answer hit like a slap to the face. I understood. They didn't just disregard me, they deliberately erased me from every remaining piece of my father's life. I had no chance to say goodbye, no final words, no moment by his casket. On the day of the funeral, I still chose to go, not for them, but for myself. I sat in the last row of the church, no flowers, no one to talk to. When the pastor gave the eulogy, I saw my mother wipe tears while Emily held Mark's hand, their eyes never once glancing toward the back. I heard whispers ahead. "Oh, that's the eldest daughter, Sarah. She's supposed to be quite successful." But I heard she was cut off from the family. I bowed my head, fingers gripping the pew, not shedding a tear. When the service ended, Mark, Emily's husband, approached me, not to offer condolences. He said quietly, with calculated intent, "I hope you're not planning to stir things up about the will. After all, the family's made their position clear. Don't be the prodigal daughter again." I looked him straight in the eye, said nothing, then walked away, without a goodbye, without a glance back. That night, sitting alone in my Chicago apartment, I opened my laptop and did something I once thought too cold-hearted. I updated my own will. I removed every blood relative. Instead, I created a scholarship fund for young women pursuing business. Women like I once was, overlooked, told they were not enough. I couldn't change the past, nor force them to love me, but I could choose what I left behind and who deserved to receive it. The deal between me and Horizon Tech was signed on a quiet, sunny June afternoon. After 3 months of negotiation, they agreed to acquire SafeLink Solutions for $28 million, retain the entire team, and commit to developing the product along my vision. The contract was signed in a conference room on the 21st floor, with glass walls overlooking the blue expanse of Lake Michigan. As everyone raised their glasses, I thought only of Evelyn, the woman who planted the first seed with $115,000 and unconditional belief. I didn't cry. But when I got back to my apartment, I opened a bottle of red wine, played soft classical music, and toasted alone. To you, and to all the times I was underestimated. That joy didn't last long. Just a week later, I received a letter from a law firm in Springfield, representing Linda Carter and Emily Carter, requesting financial clarification from Sarah Carter regarding familial obligations in light of the spiritual and material values the family had established. Attached was a copy of a document claiming a verbal financial promise, forged, with a scanned signature, stating I had once agreed to share part of my wealth if I succeeded. I was stunned. I called my lawyer, Michael Thompson, who had been with me since the early startup days. After reading the file, he looked up and said bluntly, "They're using the law as a weapon to extort you. And they're serious." In the weeks that followed, I was dragged into a flurry of legal meetings, threat letters, and document exchanges. They demanded a third of the acquisition amount, arguing that Sarah's success would not be possible without the educational foundation and family values instilled in her. I laughed bitterly reading that, like the years of neglect, the unequal gifts, the dinner table insults were now being called an educational foundation. But more bitter still was the fact that they truly believed it. They believed I owed them. They believed my success was because I had been pushed aside. I couldn't let that stand. Not just for the money, but for honor. For truth. Michael and I began collecting evidence, university scholarship letters, financial records, old transfer logs from my part-time jobs, and then we uncovered something more shocking. My father, before he died, had once tried to extort money from a relative who won the lottery. And my mother, the one who preached sacrifice, had co-owned a secret account with my father, used to hide tens of thousands in gambling debt. That may have been the reason Evelyn left everything to me. She knew, and she tried, one last time, to protect me from afar. But now I had to stand up, not just to protect money, but to protect the truth of a journey they never cared to acknowledge. The courtroom that morning felt colder than I expected, not from the air conditioning, but from the stares of 3 people who once shared my blood. My mother, Linda, sat beside her attorney, dressed in a cream suit, hair in a tight bun, like she was there to pursue justice. Emily sat on the other side, clutching a lace handkerchief. Mark, her husband, was absent. I sat across the aisle, beside Michael, gripping a plastic cup of water. This was no longer about money. This was the first time in my life I was allowed to speak the whole truth. In front of them, under the law's light. protected by facts. Their lawyer presented a slew of evidence, cherry-picked emails, fake notes, testimonies from vague acquaintances who'd heard Sarah say she would share if she ever made it. They painted me as ungrateful, playing the victim, despite a family that had sacrificed and nurtured her from a young age. My mother even shed tears recounting how she devoted her whole life to her eldest daughter. But when it was Michael's turn, he opened just one slide. Full-ride scholarship letters, my first job contract, startup expense receipts funded solely from Evelyn's legally transferred assets. Then came an audio clip from Evelyn's financial advisor, confirming she left her estate to me because she feared her daughter's financial instability could harm Sarah. Then came the investigation into my father's gambling accounts. My mother bowed her head. Emily went silent. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't read from my notes. I just said, I was left out of my own birthday party, shut out of my father's will. No one told me he died. No one asked how I was doing in Chicago. But now that I have money, you come back. Not to apologize, but to take. Family isn't defined by how much money I have. It's defined by how you treated me when I had nothing. The courtroom went completely still. After 2 weeks of proceedings, the judge dismissed all claims from the plaintiffs, no verbal contract, no legal obligation, and the family's behavior showed clear bad faith. I won. Not because I had more money, but because, for the first time, I didn't back down. I stood tall, looked straight ahead, and named what had happened to me all those years, without flinching, without shame. And I knew. This was the beginning of an end. Not for family ties, but for the illusion that I needed to be accepted to live fully. The morning after the trial, I woke up in my familiar apartment with soft sunlight streaming through the curtains. Yesterday's victory didn't make me feel triumphant, just relieved, as if I'd finally laid down a heavy stone I had been carrying for years, but that peace didn't last. By the afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. Mother wants to see you. One last time. I hesitated, but I went. The small cafe on the outskirts of Springfield was almost empty. My mother sat there, no longer fierce as usual. Her hair showed several streaks of gray, her face worn and tired. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. You think I hate you, don't you? I didn't answer. She continued. It's not because you were bad, but because you were too independent. You didn't need me. Not like Emily. I looked at her and, for the first time, saw the truth. Her love was never unconditional. It only existed when I was weak, when I depended on her, and when I learned to walk, to say no, to take care of myself. That love retracted like a rope. She looked into my eyes, tears shimmering. I don't know how to love you without feeling inferior. That truth, even if heartfelt, was not enough to erase the years of rejection. I spoke softly. I don't need you to feel inferior. I only need you to believe I deserve love too. She fell silent. We didn't hug, didn't reconcile. The meeting ended with a perfunctory goodbye and turned backs. But to me, that was enough. I no longer hoped she would change. But at least, I knew I no longer needed her approval to exist. That night, I returned to Chicago, opened my laptop, and emailed Dr. Laura Bennett, the therapist Rachel had introduced. In my email, I wrote, I'm ready to talk about my family, but this time, I want to do it, to forgive myself first. And so began a new chapter, not to run from the past, but to face it, step through it, and live on as the person I had fought so hard to become. A week after meeting my mother, I received a message from Emily. No long explanation, no apology, just one line. If you agree, I'd like to meet. Not to ask for anything. I sat in front of my phone, emotion tangled. But then I agreed. We met at a small tea house near Lincoln Park, where I once brought Grandma Evelyn for walks years ago. Emily arrived on time. No frilly dress, no heavy makeup as usual. She wore a simple coat, holding her tea as one holding something fragile. At the start, she said, "I'm not here to justify. I just want to tell you something I think you never knew." I nodded, and for the first time, Emily said about the pressure from Mother, who always compared her to me, yet placed all expectations on her to be a perfect role model in society's eyes. Mother told me that if you succeeded, I would no longer get attention. I had to try to be cuter, to make the family proud. And I believed it. I thought you were a threat. But I also saw you were lonely. Her voice broke. I hated it when Mother called you a burden after Evelyn died. But I didn't have the courage to push back. I was afraid of being pushed out. Like you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me had built a hard shell so long ago it no longer believed such words. But another part, remembering the girl in the princess dress laughing brightly in the yard, felt pain for Emily. I whispered, "I know. You didn't cause this. We were just two people placed in the wrong place who learned to survive with weapons others put in our hands." Emily lowered her head, whispered, "I'm sorry. For staying silent, for believing you owed the family. You owe no one. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to start over. Not as sisters as before, but as people." I nodded, without promises, but I said, "I will create a scholarship fund in Grandma Evelyn's name. And if you truly want to begin again, help me ensure your daughter and other girls won't grow up in the same cycle we lived." Emily gave a small, real smile. For the first time, after years in opposing worlds, my sister and I no longer looked at each other through suspicion or jealousy, but as survivors of the same battle, choosing not to let it repeat. A few weeks after meeting Emily, I officially launched the Evelyn Carter Fund, a small but passionately driven scholarship program for young women pursuing business or technology, especially those without family support. I set up the fund's office in a small corner of the co-working space where SafeLink began, with whiteboards, old laptops, and sleepless nights. I hung a photo of Grandma Evelyn in the center of the room to remind myself that everything meaningful today started with the silent belief of an older woman once overlooked. I also began regular therapy sessions with Dr. Laura Bennett. The early sessions were difficult. I was used to control, logic, planning, and problem solving. But Dr. Laura didn't ask about my plans. She only asked, "When your mother wrote that you were a stranger in the will, how did that make you feel?" And when I answered I was okay, she gently said, "Sarah, being okay is a state, not an emotion." Session by session, I learned to remove the invisible armor I had worn too long. I learned to acknowledge that I was hurt, that I once wished to be loved in the simplest way, unconditionally, without comparison, without barter. And most importantly, I learned to let go of feeling guilty for living differently from my family's expectations. One evening, after a particularly hard therapy session, I came home, opened the jewelry box, and put on one of Grandma Evelyn's vintage necklaces. A small gold pendant. Not for its monetary value, but to remind myself I was chosen, not to please someone, but because I am me. In the following days, I spent time reading, planting on the balcony, trying cooking recipes from places I had never visited. I cut ties with my family, not out of anger, but out of the need for silence to heal. In that silence, I began building a new life. Not as striking as magazine covers, nor as lively as million-dollar boardrooms, but warm, enough, and no longer needing permission to be myself. Nearly a year after the trial ended, I received a message from Emily. "Are you free for coffee this weekend?" No persuasion, no excuse, no request, just that. I agreed. We met at a small cafe in Lincoln Square. This time not to explain or apologize, but to share as two adults trying to step out of the shadow of a past that had controlled us. Emily looked different. No more nervous glances or forced face. She pulled a chair and said, "I started therapy 4 months ago. At first, I just wanted to try, but I realized I had been repeating so many things from Mother without realizing. I listened. I used to think you were selfish, breaking from the family. But now I understand you were just brave enough to live honestly. And me? I was scared. Scared of being left behind. Scared not to be loved if I didn't play the obedient daughter role. I even hated you for that. Not because you were wrong, but because you did something I wished I had the courage to do." Her voice trembled softly. "I don't expect us to go back to how it was, because back then was never truly good. But if you agree, I would like to stay in touch. Like people learning to love again, without needing shared happy memories." I looked at the sister who had once been a shining shadow before my parents' eyes, now sitting here, shedding her armor, learning to grow late just like I once did. I nodded. No promises, no tearing tearful hugs, just a full cup of coffee, no anger, no comparison, no defense. And in that moment, I realized not all family relationships have to end in severance. Some just need, to begin again the right way. Not from assigned roles, but from real empathy between two people wounded in different ways by the same home. That Thanksgiving, I didn't return to Springfield. No long interstate drive, no standing on the sidelines at family gatherings where I was never properly named. Instead, I stayed in Chicago, in my small apartment with warm golden lights, dining with those I had chosen as family. Rachel brought her signature lasagna. Ethan brought apple pie. Dr. Laura came too, her first time not as my therapist, but as a friend who had witnessed me cross through darkness in my mind. We all sat around the table, laughter and conversation flowing, sharing dishes like a simple, complete ritual. Midway through, I received a letter, this time from Emily. Not a chilly, typed will from my mother, but a handwritten note in blue ink, her slanted and uneven letters. "Thank you for not closing the last door. I still have much to learn, but because of you, I know that family isn't defined by blood, but by who chooses to stay together." I folded the letter and placed it beside my wine glass. No tears. No overwhelming emotion. Just peacefulness, as if a circle had finally closed. After dinner, everyone went out to the balcony to drink hot cocoa. The first winter breeze swept through hair, carried the scent of cinnamon and the reflective hum of a city winding down for the night. I stood beside Rachel, watched distant lights sparkle, and asked myself, I used to think freedom was being recognized, being loved, being seen again. But now I understood. Real freedom is when you no longer need that to live fully. It's when you choose what to keep: kindness, honor, gratitude, and let go of what you tried too long to hold: resentment, futile desire, blind belief that blood ties can't hurt. I don't know if there will be another meeting with my mother or if Emily will truly change anything. But I know, if there is one more encounter, I will walk in as someone who chose herself first, someone who rewrote the definition of family, and found something I once thought non-existent: a place of peace, not needing miracles, just truth and courage to live on my terms. If you've been listening this far, perhaps you understand. This story isn't just about me. It can be about anyone left behind in their own family, ever wondering if they are worthy of love. I don't tell it to nurture anger, but to remind that sometimes freedom doesn't come from changing others, but from choosing how to live, whether they change or not. I believe each of us has the right to choose family for ourselves. Those who stay when they don't have to, who lift us when we have no strength left. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own biological family? And if so, where did you find your chosen family? Share your story in the comments. Perhaps your story will be the light for someone lost, just as I once found light from those who stayed with me. And if this video resonates with a part of your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. So each week, we can share real stories from real lives and find a bit of strength to move forward together.